Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. The bikini felt like a second skin, simultaneously liberating and terrifying. 3 years of hormone therapy, countless hours of voice training, and now this moment, the culmination of a journey that had begun long ago in whispered confessions and tearful realizations. "You can do this," came a whisper, barely audible over the rush of blood in her ears. "You've come so far, Chris." The door creaked open, letting in a sliver of bright sunlight. A familiar voice called out, "Chris, you ready?" A deep breath. Just give me a minute, Tom." Tom had been there from the beginning, a constant presence through the ups and downs, the tears and triumphs. His unwavering support had been a lifeline during the darkest moments of doubt and dysphoria. "Take your time," he replied, his voice warm and reassuring. "I'll be right here when you're ready." Chris closed her eyes, remembering the promise she'd made to herself 3 years ago. The words echoed in her mind. "One day I'll walk on that beach as my true self." It had seemed an impossible dream then, but now, with trembling hands, she gathered her courage and pushed open the door. Tom stood there, his face breaking into a wide grin as he saw her. "Wow," he breathed. "You look amazing." Chris felt her cheeks flush, a mix of embarrassment and pride washing over her. She tugged self-consciously at the edges of her navy blue bikini top. "I feel so exposed," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom's eyes softened with understanding. "Hey," he said gently. "Remember why you're doing this. This is your moment, Chris. You've worked so hard for this." He was right, of course. This wasn't just about wearing a bikini. It was about claiming her identity, about finally allowing the world to see her as she truly was. Chris took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "Okay," she said, determination creeping into her voice. "Let's do this." They made their way towards the beach, the sound of waves and distant laughter growing louder with each step. Chris felt hyper-aware of every glance, every passerby, certain that everyone was staring at her. But Tom's steady presence beside her helped anchor her nerves. As they reached the edge of the sand, Chris hesitated. The beach stretched out before them, a sea of sun-kissed bodies and colorful umbrellas. For a moment, the fear threatened to overwhelm her. What if someone noticed? What if they laughed, or worse, reacted with disgust? Tom seemed to sense her rising panic. He gently took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Remember," he said softly, "you belong here just as much as anyone else. This is your beach, too." Chris nodded, drawing strength from his words and the warmth of his hand in hers. They took their first steps onto the sand, the grains warm and shifting beneath their feet. With each step, Chris felt a little of her fear ebbing away, replaced by a growing sense of exhilaration. They found a spot near the water's edge, spreading out their towels. As Chris settled onto hers, she allowed herself to really look around for the first time. To her surprise, no one was pointing or staring. People were simply enjoying the sun, playing in the waves, lost in their own worlds. "See?" Tom said with a grin. "Just another day at the beach." Chris couldn't help but laugh, the tension finally starting to release. "I guess you're right," she admitted. I've been dreaming of this moment for so long. It doesn't feel quite real yet." Tom's expression grew serious. "Chris," he said, his voice low and earnest. "I want you to know something. I've always known, even before you told me. And I've always accepted you, exactly as you are." Chris felt her breath catch in her throat. "You knew?" she whispered. He nodded, a soft smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I've known you since we were kids, remember? I saw how uncomfortable you were in your own skin, how your eyes would light up when you'd talk about wanting to be a girl. And when you finally told me, I was just so happy you felt safe enough to share that part of yourself with me." Tears pricked at the corners of Chris's eyes. "Tom, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "I just wanted you to know that I see you, Chris, the real you. And," he paused, taking a deep breath, "and I like you a lot. I have for a long time." The world seemed to stand still for a moment. Chris felt her heart racing, but this time it wasn't from fear. "You like me?" she repeated, hardly daring to believe it. Tom nodded, his cheeks flushing slightly. "Yeah, I do. And I was wondering, maybe after we're done here, we could grab dinner, like as a date?" A laugh bubbled up from deep inside Chris, bright and joyous. "Yes," she said, her face breaking into a wide smile. "Yes, I'd love that." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of sunshine and laughter. They swam in the cool water, letting the waves wash away the last of Chris's doubts and fears. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks, they gathered their things and headed back towards the boardwalk. "So," Tom said as they walked, their hands brushing against each other, "where do you want to go for dinner?" Chris thought for a moment, then smiled. "You know what? Let's go somewhere nice. I think I want to wear a dress." Tom's eyes lit up. "Yeah?" She nodded, feeling a surge of confidence. "Yeah, I'm done hiding, Tom. From now on, I'm going to dress how I want, live how I want. For me." As they reached the boardwalk, Chris paused for a moment, looking back at the beach. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the sand and water, transforming the scene into something magical. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. This was just the beginning, she realized. There would be more challenges ahead, more moments of doubt and fear. But she had made it this far. She had found the courage to be true to herself, to step out onto that beach in a bikini. And she had found someone who accepted and cared for her, exactly as she was. With a smile, Chris turned back to Tom, reaching out to take his hand. "Come on," she said, her voice filled with newfound confidence. "Let's go get ready for our date." As they walked away from the beach, hand in hand, Chris felt a sense of excitement for what the future might hold. For the first time in her life, she felt truly, completely herself. And she was ready to embrace whatever came next, with open arms and an open heart. The warm evening air caressed Chris's skin as she and Tom strolled along the bustling boardwalk. The scent of salt water mingled with the aroma of fried foods and sweet cotton candy, creating a symphony of sensory experiences. Strings of twinkling lights overhead cast a soft, magical glow over the scene. "So," Tom said, his thumb absently tracing circles on the back of Chris's hand, "any ideas on where you want to go for dinner?" Chris bit her lip, considering. "There's this little Italian place I've always wanted to try," she admitted. "It's a bit fancy, though. Are you sure you don't mind if I wear a dress?" Tom's eyes crinkled as he smiled. "Chris, I want you to wear whatever makes you feel most comfortable and beautiful. If that's a dress, then I can't wait to see you in it." A warm flush crept up Chris's neck, and she ducked her head to hide her pleased smile. "Okay," she said softly. "Then that's what I'll do." They made their way back to Chris's apartment, a cozy studio not far from the beach. As they entered, Chris felt a moment of self-consciousness. This was the first time Tom had been inside since she'd fully transitioned, and the space reflected her true self in a way her childhood bedroom never could. Soft, gauzy curtains framed the windows, and a collection of potted plants brought life to every corner. On the dresser, an array of makeup and perfume bottles caught the light. It was undeniably feminine, and for a moment, Chris held her breath, watching Tom's reaction. But Tom simply smiled, his eyes taking in the space with evident appreciation. "This is so you," he said warmly. "I love it." Chris felt something uncoil in her chest. "Thanks," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Make yourself comfortable. I'll just go get ready." She disappeared into the bathroom, heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. This was it, her first real date as herself. Opening her closet, she ran her fingers over the various fabrics, considering her options. Finally, she settled on a flowing sundress in a soft coral color. The material was light and airy, perfect for the warm evening. She slipped it on, reveling in the way it swished around her legs. Chris took her time with her makeup, carefully applying foundation, a touch of blush, and a swipe of mascara. She kept it light and natural, wanting to enhance rather than mask her features. Finally, she added a tinted lip gloss, the soft pink shade complementing the color of her dress. Taking a deep breath, she looked at herself in the mirror. The woman who stared back at her was both familiar and new, her true self, finally allowed to shine. Chris smiled, feeling a surge of confidence. She was ready. Stepping out of the bathroom, she saw Tom's eyes widen. He stood up from where he'd been sitting on the edge of her bed, his gaze traveling appreciatively over her outfit. "Wow," he breathed. "Chris, you look stunning." Chris felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "Thank you," she said softly. "You look pretty great yourself." And he did. Tom had changed into a button-down shirt and dark jeans, his usually messy hair somewhat tamed. But it was the way he was looking at her that made Chris's heart skip a beat, like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Shall we?" Tom asked, offering his arm with a playful grin. Chris laughed, linking her arm through his. "We shall." As they stepped out into the evening air, Chris felt a newfound sense of freedom. She was walking down the street in a dress, arm in arm with a handsome man, and she felt right. Like everything had finally clicked into place. The Italian restaurant was just as charming as Chris had imagined. Twinkling fairy lights adorned the patio, and the soft strains of violin music drifted through the air. As they were led to their table, Chris noticed a few glances in their direction, but they were appreciative rather than judgmental. "This place is lovely," Tom said as they settled into their seats. "Great choice." Chris smiled, running her fingers along the edge of the crisp white tablecloth. "I'm glad you like it. I've been wanting to come here for ages, but, well, I was always too scared before." Tom's expression softened. He reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. "I'm honored to be here with you for your first time, then." As they perused the menu, chatting and laughing, Chris felt the last of her nerves melting away. This was Tom, after all, her best friend since childhood, the person who had stood by her through every step of her transition, and now maybe something more. Their waiter approached, a friendly smile on his face. "Good evening," he said warmly. "What can I get for you ladies and gentlemen this evening?" Chris felt a rush of warmth at being addressed as a lady. It was a small thing, but it meant the world to her. She ordered the mushroom risotto, while Tom opted for the lasagna. As they waited for their food, Tom leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "Chris," he said softly, "I want you to know how proud I am of you. What you did today going to the beach, that took real courage." Chris felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "You've always been there for me, Tom, even when I didn't deserve it." Tom shook his head firmly. "Don't say that. You've always deserved support and love, Chris. Always." Their food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. As they ate, Chris found herself opening up more than she ever had before. She talked about her fears, her hopes for the future, her dreams of becoming a writer. Tom listened attentively, offering encouragement and sharing his own aspirations. As the evening wore on, Chris felt herself falling even deeper for the man across from her. It wasn't just his kindness or his unwavering support. It was the way he looked at her, like he truly saw her for who she was. After they'd finished their meal, Tom suggested a walk along the beach. Chris agreed eagerly, slipping off her shoes as they stepped onto the sand. The moon hung low over the water, casting a silvery path across the waves. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, hands intertwined. The sound of the waves and the distant laughter from the boardwalk created a perfect backdrop for the moment. Finally, Tom stopped, turning to face Chris. In the moonlight, his eyes seemed to sparkle with an intensity that took her breath away. "Chris," he said softly, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "I need you to know something. I didn't just start liking you when you transitioned. I've had feelings for you for years. But I never said anything because I wanted you to have the space to figure out who you were, without any pressure from me." Chris felt her heart swell with emotion. "Oh, Tom," she whispered. He continued, his voice thick with feeling. "Watching you become who you truly are. It's been amazing. You're the strongest, bravest person I know, and I love you, Chris. All of you." For a moment, Chris couldn't speak. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "I love you too," she managed finally. "I think I always have." Tom's face broke into a radiant smile. Slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted, he leaned in. Their lips met in a soft, sweet kiss that seemed to make the world around them disappear. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Chris couldn't stop smiling. This was everything she had ever dreamed of, being loved and accepted for who she truly was. As they walked back along the beach, hand in hand, Chris felt a sense of peace settle over her. The journey to this point had been long and often painful, but standing here now, she knew it had all been worth it. She was Chris, a woman, a friend, a lover, and for the first time in her life, she was truly, completely happy. The days that followed their first date were filled with a kind of joy Chris had never experienced before. She and Tom fell into a comfortable rhythm, spending their free time together, exploring the city, trying new restaurants, and simply enjoying each other's company. One sunny afternoon, about a week after their beach outing, Tom suggested they have a picnic in the park. Chris agreed enthusiastically, packing a basket with sandwiches, fruit, and a bottle of sparkling cider. As they settled onto a checkered blanket beneath a sprawling oak tree, Chris couldn't help but marvel at how natural it all felt. She was wearing a flowy skirt and a light blouse, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. Tom kept stealing glances at her, a warm smile playing on his lips. "What?" Chris asked, laughing as she caught him looking again. Tom shook his head, his expression fond. "Nothing, I love seeing you like this. So comfortable in your own skin." Chris felt a warmth bloom in her chest. "I never thought I could feel this way," she admitted softly. "For so long I felt like I was playing a part, you know? But now I feel like I'm finally the star of my own life." Tom reached out, taking her hand in his. "You are," he said firmly. "And you deserve every bit of happiness that comes with it." As they ate and chatted, Chris found herself opening up even more about her transition journey. She talked about the moments of doubt, the small victories that had kept her going, the fear of losing people she cared about. "You know," she said, picking at a blade of grass, "there were times I almost gave up. It all seemed so overwhelming." Tom squeezed her hand gently. "But you didn't give up. You kept going, even when it was hard. That's what makes you so incredible, Chris." She smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude for his unwavering support. "I couldn't have done it without you, you know? Having you in my corner, it meant everything." As the afternoon wore on, they found themselves lying side by side on the blanket, watching the clouds drift by overhead. Chris turned her head to look at Tom, studying the profile of his face. "Tom?" she said softly. He turned to meet her gaze. "Yeah." "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For being my friend, for supporting me, for loving me." Tom's eyes softened. He leaned in. "Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done," he murmured. In that moment, surrounded by the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant laughter of children playing, Chris felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. This was what she had been fighting for all along, the freedom to be herself, to love and be loved in return. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, they packed up their picnic and began the walk back to Chris's apartment. They moved hand in hand, their steps in perfect sync. "So," Tom said as they neared her building, "I was thinking. There's this Trans Plus support group that meets at the community center every Thursday. Would you maybe want to check it out sometime? Only if you're comfortable, of course." Chris felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach, but it was overshadowed by a surge of warmth at Tom's thoughtfulness. "You know what? I think I would like that," she said. "It might be nice to connect with other people who've been through similar experiences." Tom beamed at her. "That's great. I'm really proud of you, Chris. You've come so far." As they reached her door, Chris turned to face Tom. "Do you want to come in for a bit?" she asked, suddenly feeling shy. Tom's smile softened. "I'd love to," he said. Inside, Chris busied herself making tea while Tom settled onto her small couch. As she handed him a steaming mug, their fingers brushed, sending a jolt of electricity through her. She sat down beside him, tucking her legs underneath her. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, sipping their tea and enjoying each other's presence. "Chris," Tom said finally, setting his mug down on the coffee table, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you." She turned to face him, her heart suddenly racing. "What is it?" Tom took a deep breath, reaching out to take her hand in his. "I know we've only been dating for a short time, but, well, we've known each other forever. And I was wondering, would you like to be my girlfriend? Officially?" Chris felt her breath catch in her throat. A wave of emotion washed over her. Joy, excitement, a touch of fear, but mostly an overwhelming sense of rightness. "Yes," she whispered, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "Yes, I'd love to be your girlfriend." This was everything she had ever wanted, to be loved and accepted for who she truly was, to have a partner who understood and supported her journey. As the evening deepened into night, they stayed curled up on the couch, talking and laughing, sharing hopes and dreams for the future. Chris felt a sense of contentment she had never known before. She was Chris, a woman, a friend, a girlfriend, and she was finally truly happy. The weeks turned into months, and Chris found herself settling into a life she had once only dreamed of. Her relationship with Tom blossomed, growing deeper and stronger with each passing day. They faced challenges together, celebrated victories both big and small, and continued to support each other's growth and dreams. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through a park ablaze with fall colors, Tom turned to Chris with a mischievous glint in his eye. "So," he said, a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth, "I have a surprise for you." Chris raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh? What kind of surprise?" Tom's grin widened. "Well, remember how you always talked about wanting to write? How you had all these stories inside you, but you were too afraid to share them with the world?" Chris nodded, her heart beginning to race. "Yeah, of course. But what does that have to do with—" Tom pulled an envelope out of his jacket pocket, holding it out to her. "Open it," he said softly. With trembling fingers, Chris took the envelope and carefully opened it. Inside was a letter. As she read, her eyes grew wide and she felt tears begin to well up. "Tom," she whispered, looking up at him in disbelief. Is this real?" He nodded, his eyes shining with pride and love. "It's real. I submitted one of your short stories to that literary magazine you love, and they want to publish it, Chris. They want to publish your story." For a moment, Chris couldn't speak. She stared at the letter, reading and rereading the words of praise and acceptance. Then, with a cry of joy, she threw her arms around Tom, nearly knocking him off balance. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.